We've got barrister and writer Stephen Barrett, we've got columnist at Spiked Online, Ella Whelan, and William Clouston, leader of the Social Democratic Party.
Yeah.
Seen you for a while, William.
No, it's been a while.
I assume you're still leader of the Social Democratic Party.
Yeah, we're still plugging away.
Excellent, good to see you all. Yeah. Well, there's so much to talk about tonight. I don't know, where should we begin? I suppose we should begin with the Rwanda nonsense, because, Stephen, you are, as I've often said, the legal department representation here tonight. I just had Ivan Sampson on earlier on today, who I thought was talking absolute nuts of balderdash when he said that, you know, it's not for the Parliament to make rules which are in some way in breach of international law. Surely it's quite obvious that that's what they should be doing.
Yes, and lawyers who speak in public and say that international law is superior to our own law are not merely wrong, they're also distinctly anti-democratic.
Yes. Because
the fundamental principle, and we had a civil war about this,
right,
but we did not want to be ruled by an autocratic dictator, a monarch, a king.
Yes.
We wanted to be ruled by a democratic parliament, and they are sovereign. And international law is the law of sovereigns. It's contracts between promises.
Yes.
Between princes. And it is never binding upon those of us who are merely in the state. There's an argument that it is binding on the government, which depends very much upon the international law in particular, but it's never binding on Parliament. Parliament can do whatever it wants and whatever it considers necessary in our defence and in our protection. And, you know, this issue of immigration is quite clearly, for whatever, however you see it, it is about national security.
Yeah. And also Parliament, William, is for the people, isn't it? I mean, it is the people, effectively. It may not feel like it very often. It may not represent us as we would like it to, but that's their job, isn't it? We elect them to do what we want them to do.
That's true, but we have a generation of politicians that are used to these useless. Well, they are useless as well. They're used to outsourcing all this stuff, so they don't take any responsibility. Stephen's quite right. We can choose to incorporate some international law if we want, and we can abide, but we can also choose not to do so. That's the key. So the responsibility...
That must be surely our right as a nation.
The responsibility, if you believe in sovereignty and democracy, it is basics, absolute basics. So this whole thing, and we'll get onto the detail in a bit, possibly, but the whole thing, no one is going to Rwanda.
No.
This is a flawed scheme.
I think the detail is a pointless exercise to even look at.
It's a little bit of theatre in the West End, isn't it, tonight?
It is. I don't think, Ella, anybody in their right mind would say to you or me or either of the panel that this is actually going to work. And it's been a kind of pointless exercise. I described it yesterday as a bit like watching The Wizard of Oz and waiting for Toto to pull the curtain back, and there's this guy in a suit whose name is Rishi Sunak, and he's just sort of playing with some toys.
Well, we've had we're sort of used to these, like, supposedly nail-biting moments in Parliament, particularly, you know, because the Conservative Party has been at the brink of, or, you know, it seems to be at the brink of collapse several times, even going back to Theresa May's sort of era. There were all these votes and moments of potential split. Maybe it's fatigue with us that I don't think anyone was that excited by, even among the sort of political commentariat. But also within, you know, among their own ranks, all the rebels turn out to be not very rebellious at all. The bill turns out to have a pretty smooth ride, and no one is really that fussed about it. And I think it's probably because they know that this isn't, it's not a sort of solution that's going to put a lid on the issue. Because, you know, as much as there is, as Stephen has outlined very well, the sort of legal, the history of what a parliament can and can't do, or what it should and shouldn't be allowed to do, and the problem with lawyers and all of this. But there is this fudge that the government's going to have to get over at some point or face, which is that you have a fundamental clash of international law, international rules, courts somewhere else, the ECHR, versus what you and I and Joe Bloggs vote for and expect to be put into practice in terms of politics. And, you know, at the moment, Rishi Sunak's got David Cameron high up, who's obviously come in and given his opinion behind the scenes about don't even go there with the ECHR. You know, you could feel a shift with all of that. They're not going to do anything. You know, they're basically briefing now, suggesting they're briefing civil servants to say, just don't worry about it.
Just don't do it.
Just do what we say. Don't worry. It's not that.
And also the other
all a pretense.
The other massive failing of it is that you're asking people who commit breaches of the law on a daily basis, who run criminal gangs, running drugs, guns, people, whatever you like, brothels. You're asking them to obey a law. Well, of course they're not going to obey it, are they? Because they don't obey laws. It's like asking people who drive cars without insurance to get insurance. Sorry, it's not happening.
The really sad thing is, Mike, that this is so frustrating for the public because there's a big political constituency who want a secure border, and we're not asking for very much. I've made the point so many times. We want this sorted, and yet it's really surprising from a political point of view. So forget put the legals to the side. Why on earth did Sunak pin his sort of flag to something which is completely unworkable and can't work?
Right.
It's like, I need to get through this week or this month. But in the end, no one's going to Rwanda. No. This won't be sorted out under this government, and he has to face the public in a general election.
Do you think it
disastrous?
Might be, I mean, I don't know if you saw today that rather obscure, which really pathetic kind of attack ad that they put out, in which they referred to Keir Starmer as better call Keir, a bit like Better Call Saul, making out that he's an enabler of terrorists.
It's gutter politics.
Yeah, it really is. Yeah. And it's just pathetic, really, because he's a lawyer, and, I haven't got much time for Keir Starmer, but there is also a principle that you do have to defend people from time to time. I'll have a go at him if he chooses to go and defend particular individuals, but if he's on what they call the cab rank and all of that, he's clearly not an enabler for terrorism. He clearly would try to put people away if they'd done something wrong. We can all argue about what he did in the past and all the rest of it, but, maybe in some kind of twisted way, I don't know, Stephen, if you think of this, that Sunak wanted to see the Labour Party stop them so he could say, well, you stopped me doing the boats, and that's your fault.
Well, I think it's interesting to pick up on a point that William has made, because there's something that I like to return to, in that we seem to still believe that we should do theatre and new law.
Yeah.
And you govern a country by doing a bit of theatre, being a little bit controversial, which that ad clearly is, getting a bit of attention, and passing a new law. When actually, all that anybody really wants, and this applies to the Met as well. I mean, the Metropolitan Police don't need new laws.
Right.
They need to enforce the laws they have.
Yes. Well, we just saw what they were doing today in an alleyway in the West End of London. Carry on doing that, and you'll cut crime overnight.
Exactly. And there is a massive public outcry for enforcement rather than new laws. Yeah. And I mean, the small boats invasion could be declared a national emergency. It could be dealt with now. You don't need new law. No. So we get these, and I get caught up in them. Of course I do, because I'm a lawyer and I love the technical arguments. But, I am a bit of a nerd. I'll admit that. Your viewers don't have to be nerds like me. They just need to know that this isn't really necessary. Protecting our border is not that complicated. We have actually fought wars before. We can. The British state is actually capable of remarkable turnaround speed. If Russia were going to invade in 6 hours, all sorts of things would become possible.
Yes.
And what we're not seeing, or what we are seeing, is this reluctance in Parliament to admit that. They'd rather do the theatre, and what William called the gutter politics. Obviously, I don't have a view on that, but they'd rather do the theatre of it, rather than actual substance.
Well, I mean, the thing about that sort of advert is it feels like an open goal, because the only answer to that is you are the ones that are in power. You are the one, and for quite a long time, by the way. And I think most of us know that some of these problems stretched beyond before the Conservative government, have been sort of decades in the making. But I mean, Christ, you've been the ones that have been able to do something about this, particularly in relation to terrorism, particularly in relation to national security, over the last sort of 10, 15 years. So, I mean, you just can't put the blame like that. But I think this all comes back to the fact that, in particular, Rishi Sunak encapsulates this very well for me. The Conservative Party at the moment is split, and then each one of them is half worried about how they look on the international stage. Yeah. They're all, let's remember how many of them were Remainers. And that's not a sort of cheap point. It's saying that they still very much care how they're seen in Europe. They don't want to go near the ECHR. They don't want to do anything nasty around international law or do anything controversial. And that means that this Rwanda plan is a perfect opportunity to look like you're doing something. I think they probably hoped it wouldn't have backfired this bad. But it's a big sort of splash. Yes, new law will do something, knowing that it won't work. I actually think it's that cynical.